Heading into 2020, there are a number of key congressional races set to take center stage, including Senator Mitch McConnell's re-election bid.
Over the weekend, I spent some time in Kentucky and had the chance to sit down with Kentucky Congressman and Chairman of the House Budget Committee, John Yarmuth. We discussed McConnell's challenger and Yarmuth's thoughts on impeachment. Take a listen. And now next year, Senator McConnell will be on the ballot. Yeah. And on the one hand, as you said, this is at this point a strongly Republican state. On the other hand, much like Matt Bevin, he is one of the least popular senators among his own constituencies in the country. Right. Do you think that there's a shot that Mitch McConnell could be vulnerable?
There's a shot. I think it's going to be tough. One thing you have to recognize that one of the reasons that Mitch is so weak in polling is because there are a lot of Trump voters who don't think that he has helped Trump enough. So they're not necessarily
They're not liberal Democrats.
No, they're not liberal Democrats. These are so. You know, I think Mitch is right around 35% approval rating right now, but there's probably 10 points out there that he would get in a general election anyway, and they're not going to turn away from Trump and then vote for the Democrat. But if Trump, for some reason, is not on the ballot, that makes the race much more winnable. I think
Do you think that's a possibility?
I think it's a possibility. I've been saying for 2 years I didn't think he'd be a candidate ultimately, and I think if he sees, with him it's all going to be about his ego, and if he sees that he's facing a humiliating defeat at the polls, then forget impeachment for a minute, but just if he sees that he's going to be destroyed at the polls, I can see him saying, "I've made America as great as I can, and I'm going to go to Mar-a-Lago full time and play golf."
Yeah, well, that's not a bad life.
That's right.
So one factor is whether or not Trump is on the ballot. The other factor is the Democratic candidate. Obviously, there's a primary going on. Chuck Schumer's recruit, Amy McGrath, who ran for Congress here and is a veteran, is one of the candidates who's running. I know you're not going to endorse or wade too deeply into that, but what do you think are the characteristics of the type of candidate who'd be strongest against Senator McConnell?
Well, I think actually someone who paints a contrast in both energy and warmth. And Mitch McConnell, for whatever you can say about him, nobody has accused him of being charismatic. and I think that you need somebody who has energy and charisma and also warmth, because he's a pretty cold character. So I think more so than policy and issues, I think that personality and again, energy, I think, is going to be important. Mitch is 77, I think, now, and moves pretty slowly, and I think that kind of lively. Somebody who can not let him get away with his normal techniques in debate. You're not going to get too many chances to debate Mitch, because he won't agree to many. But the one opportunity, or the two or three probably opportunities you have to really be on your toes to do it. Amy doesn't have a lot of experience in that field, but I'm not sure we have a candidate who does.
Right. Well, primary's still open, so other folks could potentially still jump in. You have known Mitch McConnell for how many years?
Since 1968.
One of the things that fascinates people, what do you think makes him tick? Because he's a very different, in certain ways, he's a different politician than he was in previous incarnations. What is your analysis of sort of what drives Mitch McConnell?
It's power, pure and simple, and it's unfortunate because it's power without a purpose. It's power for power's sake. He doesn't really have any core principles. You can find almost no legislation in his 35 years with his name on it. He really has not been engaged in policy. He really doesn't care much about it. But he does care about power. He cares about the court, and he cares about his court appointments. But it's mostly just about power, and it's not really ego with him. That's the thing. I don't think Mitch has a big ego, but from a very, very early age, Mitch has gotten up every day since I think he was 5 years old, and all he thinks about is what he can do that day to advance his political career. And as I've said before, he's the most focused politician I've ever seen. He's I called him the Tiger Woods of politics once, because Tiger, again, since he was a child, he focused on nothing else. And that makes him very formidable. And he's smart. I mean, he's very smart politically, and he understands how the games are played. He always has been able to raise tons of money. He knows how to demonize his opponents, and that's what he's done.
Yeah. Well,
He's ruthless as well as being focused.
I mean, in a lot of ways, the president's fate in terms of impeachment is squarely in Mitch McConnell's hands.
Yes.
Now, I think, and I think most people think, that it is very unlikely that Senate Republicans would join with Democrats to convict him in the Senate and ultimately remove him from office. But, I mean, what do you think? What do you think Mitch McConnell thinks of Donald Trump? Do you think he's firmly behind him, or do you think he's looking for a chance?
I think Mitch McConnell despises Donald Trump. I think Mitch McConnell would like to get rid of him tomorrow. But I'm not sure what calculation he's made. I always said, if Mitch believes at some point that Donald Trump, President Trump, is jeopardizing the Senate majority, that he will shut him down. And I think we're very close to that. Now, what he can do, I'm not sure. I don't think he can get 25 or 20, he'd need 27, 20, well, 29 votes. I don't think there's much way to get that publicly. There is a provision, I understand, I've only learned about this recently, that you could get a secret ballot on impeachment. It would still require 67 votes, but with 51 votes, you could get a secret ballot. Now, Republicans across the country would scream bloody murder if that happened, but that's a way to get him emboldened. I'm not sure, as much as I believe that President Trump should be removed from office and it represents an imminent threat to our democracy and our national security and many other things, politically, it's probably not a good thing to get rid of him, because I don't think the Republicans would nominate Mike Pence. I think they'd nominate somebody like Nikki Haley, somebody who would be very, very tough for a Democrat to beat.
Interesting. So in some ways, it's better for Democrats politically if the Senate does not convict.
I think it may be, yes. But again, so you asked me about Mitch. I'm convinced Mitch would love not to have to deal with Donald Trump.
Last question for you. Well, two more questions. How do you think Speaker Pelosi has done handling the impeachment inquiry thus far? Do you think that it's going well for Democrats? Do you feel like the American people is learning something through this process?
Well, I'm not sure they've learned a lot yet, but I think Nancy's handled it extremely well. And I've said this from the beginning, because I co-sponsored an impeachment resolution in 2017. So I've been on.
You've been there.
I've been on the impeachment train for a long time, and people would say, "What do you think?" And I said, I said probably 2 months ago, we ought to vote on it. We ought to vote on whether to have an impeachment inquiry, but I also said at the same time, I said, I think Speaker Pelosi is doing it exactly correctly. She had and has 63 freshman members. Many of whom come from swing districts, and some even from some Republican districts. There was no way that she should have put pressure on them early in the process to come out, to have them vote on an impeachment inquiry. There had to be enough, I think, public sentiment, and they had to feel confident enough in that vote. And I think she waited exactly the right time. And of course, we got the benefit of the break with the whistleblower and the news of that criminal act that the president performed in soliciting political information from a foreign government.
So one of the reasons that I love talking to John Yarmuth about Mitch McConnell is because he has literally known him since 1968. Like, few people know Mitch McConnell better than Yarmuth. So to get that insight into his relationship with the president, I mean, he says flat out he thinks he despises him, but for him it's all about power, so it serves him to support him at the moment. But also getting a little bit of insight into whether he is potentially vulnerable for his reelect. Now look, it's a long shot.
I was about to say.
The candidate that the Democrats are supporting, that Chuck Schumer recruited into this race, is a terrible candidate. Nice woman, great resume, served the country. Terrible candidate. There is some hope that another Democrat or two who will be stronger would jump into the race. But look, there basically wasn't a Republican Party in Kentucky until Mitch McConnell came along.
Yeah.
He built it county by county to now it's essentially a juggernaut. So he really runs that state very closely. It'll be hard to beat, even though he's very unpopular.
Yeah, but that's the reason why he's unpopular is because it's like, why is Trump more popular than you in your own state? It's like, well, Trump, is much more of a champion of like the working man and has been talking about the mines. McConnell is much more of a Chamber of Commerce type Republican, and that's a lot of the reason. In many ways, that's the type of thing that Trump actually ran against.
Right.
And so actually, I mean, McConnell wanted to win or really wanted to shore up his support. I just don't think he cares. Is that he could actually talk a little bit more like a Trumpist and not like we're going to defend them against the Democrats, but actually talk a little bit about some of the working class and some of those other anti-business interests that is so much of what Trump captured in that state.
Well, and the other piece is some of the people who don't like McConnell, they think that he hasn't been supportive enough of Trump, right? So these aren't like liberal Democratic voters who are waiting to be turned. But I will say, look, Kentucky's different state than people think. It is definitely not a Chamber of Commerce Republican kind of a state. It's a very pro-labor state. There is a potential candidate, Rocky Atkins, who's the minority House leader, who's conservative on cultural issues. He's pro-life and he's very strongly pro-labor. Now, he's going to struggle to raise national money because he's pro-life.
Yeah.
But he'd be a very strong contender against McConnell, one of the stronger people that the Democrats could put up. There's a lot of talk about him maybe jumping in. There's also talk about Matt Jones, who's a personal friend of mine. He's also a sports radio host, very well known in the state. He has the top radio show in the whole state. Everybody knows who he is. And they got to know him through sports before they got to know him through politics, which is a good thing. He's from the right part of the state. He's from Eastern Kentucky, which helps as well. He's very talented. He's very charismatic. So he's another one. He's kind of a progressive populist type of candidate. So he's another one that's talked about. But yeah, fascinating to kind of get that insight into how McConnell thinks about these things.
Very cool.
Yep. And we'll have more Rising right after this.